In this episode, I'm going to take you through some key stats from Heron Todd White's property report for houses and units around the country. These guys have national valuation firms, so the input into this report is somewhat accurate and relative in the market right now and in various different markets. But I'm going to show you also why you shouldn't just be looking at the data. So in this clock in front of you, you see peak of market, declining market on the right, then you got the bottom of the market, and then rising market. So as the clock moves around, that's where the property moves through the cycles. So they think peak of the market, Adelaide Hills, Albany, Alice Springs, you might be familiar with some of those other areas, Toowoomba, Newcastle. They think they're at the peak of the market. I think within some of those markets, there's still some really great opportunities. And I don't think we've seen the peak of the market for some of those areas, but that's not to say the entire market in those areas isn't necessarily at the peak, because all those areas have had substantial growth. Then you got a declining market. So they think Brisbane, I'm actually quite shocked by this. I think many parts of Brisbane are not in a declining market, or at least for the better part, they're at least in stagnation, preparing to boom. I think Brisbane isn't quite the right time just yet, but I think it's getting pretty close personally. I definitely agree with Ipswich being in a declining market. I definitely agree with these ones. Those are the areas that I know, but you can see those. Then you got approaching bottom of the market, Central Coast. I still think a lot of parts of Central Coast are probably going to continue to see falls. So they think bottom of the market. So people think, hey, this is the best time to buy in, is at the bottom of the market. And I don't think you can always predict the exact bottom of the market. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. But look, they think overall Geelong, Illawarra, Melbourne, Southern Highlands. That doesn't mean you can buy in any place in those areas and just think you're at the bottom of the market, because there are sub-markets, but this is an overall. I think Sydney is in the start of recovery. I tend to agree with that based on overall Sydney data, but I still think there's plenty of areas in Sydney that are still in declining markets, especially those outskirt areas where affordability is hit quite substantially. And then rising market, look, I definitely agree with many parts of Perth being in rising market, although I do think many parts of Perth are approaching the peak of the market, if not already at the peak of the market, or at least in this mini cycle. So I think Perth, many parts are still in a rising market. I agree with that. I agree with Townsville. Both those markets are coming up in all my searches. I agree with Rockhampton. So for the better part, I do agree with most of their reports. Approaching peak of the market, you can see Cairns, Kalgoorlie, if you know where that is, Emerald, Mackay, basically regional areas approaching peak of the market. I'd be very, very cautious buying in those regional areas, especially after they've had booms for the last couple of years. So that's with houses, keep in mind. So this is a property clock with houses, and you can't say one person is 100% right, because there are sub-markets within each of these areas. So with units, it's a very similar story. I won't go through those in as much detail. I don't always like buying units. I think there's a lot more rules that come into play when you do buy units. But if you are developing units and you're looking at retaining them, I personally think that units can be a great investment, providing that you abide by some rules, which have seen units sometimes outperform houses in terms of capital growth. So units can be great for cash flow. They can be really good for capital growth, but a lot of times people buy units off project marketers. They buy them in big complexes where they're not a unique product. So I've given you a couple of hints. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, let me know and subscribe for more.